Our very own JD Durkin is now live at Capitol Hill covering the latest twists in the Russia scandal. JD, what's going on?
Well, Congressman Ted Lieu is the representative for the 33rd District of the great state of California. He is, of course, a Democrat, and he joins us live now on Cheddar's Closing Bell. Congressman, really great to have you here.
Honored to be on Cheddar.
You and I were just talking. You're quite the prolific tweeter as of late over the course of the last 6 months. Do you feel like you've really taken on more of a role here in social media in light of the Trump administration?
I've been trying to speak truth to power. I've been doing that for many years, just no one cared until recently. So I am excited that more people are paying attention.
Well, I wanted to start there because there was a tweet of yours earlier today. Friday feeling, that's a big hashtag, right? Everyone likes that one. So here's your Friday feeling. Let's talk about it. You say shady Donald Trump Jr., guilty Paul Manafort, amateur Jared Kushner are in bigly legal jeopardy for their collusion meeting. Of course, you're referencing now more details we know about this meeting last summer at Trump Tower specifically. Representative, let me ask you, when you look at all the details we're quickly learning about this, so this seeming drip, drip, drip of a scandal, how do you honestly think this will end up playing out?
Well, this is no longer a drip, drip, drip. This was a rainfall that happened. We have actual emails in black and white that show collusion. It shows that the Russian government was trying to help Donald Trump. They let Donald Trump Jr. know about it, and they had derogatory information Hillary Clinton that they wanted to provide, and Donald Trump Jr.'s response was, I love it. And then he set up a meeting, and then he showed up at that meeting with Jared Kushner and Manafort. That is conspiracy to violate the Federal Election Campaign Act, which prohibits soliciting information that's of value from a foreign national.
I'm curious what your reaction was when Donald Trump Jr. basically willingly took to his own Twitter page the other day to release the details of this email. That was a real head-scratcher to a lot of people. What was your reaction when you saw that the son of the president was willingly putting this information out there?
That he just authenticated this very damning thread of emails. And today, Representative Ruben Gallego and I went to the House floor and read the emails publicly into the congressional record because these are pretty amazing emails. It literally says right in the emails that the Russian government is helping Donald Trump, and we have this information on Hillary Clinton we want to give to you. So this is something they can't walk away from. This is actual evidence of collusion.
I think the debate right now, Congressman, tends to be, is this information as presented right now prosecutable? A lot of people or critics may say it's not. You seem to be striking a different tone. Make your case as for why there is evidence at this point of illegality.
I'm a former prosecutor. The Federal Election Campaign Act says you cannot solicit anything of value from a foreign national. It's just a straight-up prohibition. So when Donald Trump Jr. gets his email and he responds by saying, I love it, that is step one of a conspiracy. And in a conspiracy, you just need one step, and you're guilty of it. But he proceeds to go more than that. He then sets up a meeting, and then he shows up at that meeting. So let me give you an analogy. Sure. Let's say someone says, I've got a bunch of cocaine, emails that to you. And you reply back saying, I love it. Then you set up a meeting, you show up at that meeting, and if that cocaine turned out to be salt, it is still prosecutable as a crime of conspiracy.
So then it seems like, I mean, were you really surprised to maybe learn, since you are a prosecutor yourself, that there wasn't just perhaps more sound legal advice in and around the president's immediate orbit to avoid a potential misstep, the likes of which we saw earlier this week?
There may have been sound legal advice, and they just ignored it because you've seen so many instances where the president goes out and says something very incriminating that I can't imagine his lawyers would have let him say. So after he fired FBI Director Comey, Donald Trump, the president, a few days later basically went on national TV and said he did it because of the whole Russia thing. And then you see his son doing something very similar, which is he releases this very incriminating email.
Here's what I want to ask you, specifically in regards to this tweet from earlier today. Shady Donald Trump Jr., guilty Paul Manafort, amateur Jared Kushner. You've also called the Attorney General Jeff Sessions lying Jeff Sessions. I think we certainly know where the inspiration for this comes from, the rhetoric of the president. Let me push back on something respectfully, Representative, if you don't mind. A lot of your Democratic colleagues that say, we don't need to stoop to the level when it comes to this rhetoric or almost name-calling. So do you have pressure, do you ever face pushback from your constituents or your peers that say, is it really appropriate to also engage in kind of even fun-loving, almost name-calling of people in and around the president's orbit?
It is absolutely inappropriate, and that's part of the point. I want to show how ridiculous the president's tweets are by copying his style and using his own words. Never in my life would I think of calling the President of the United States dumb as a rock. But I did that because he called a private citizen dumb as a rock. And I thought it was so outrageous, I'm going to throw it right back at him and see what people think of it. And part of it is to show how outrageous this president is. And that's one reason I do these tweets.
Would you argue that that stance has been effective for you so far over the course of this president's administration?
I do have a lot more followers now than I used to.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess that answer is yes. Let me quote something that the president said yesterday. He did defend his son's involvement with this meeting last summer at Trump Tower. Obviously, the president was in France yesterday. And he said, quote, most people would have taken that meeting. It's called opposition research. Most of our viewers, I'm assuming, have not been elected representatives. You've been in this world for quite some time. Right. Is that true, Representative? Is this par for the course?
Right. Not at all. So there's nothing wrong with trying to get opposition research on your opponent. It is totally wrong if it's coming from a foreign government. That's what makes it illegal. And the President of the United States doesn't seem to understand that, which shows me why he's so frustrated with this whole Russia thing. He doesn't seem to understand why it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it's Russia. If it was some sort of firm in Alabama, no one would care. It's because it's a foreign power. And in the Constitution, we put in an emoluments clause to prevent foreign powers from trying to influence us. And in congressional statutes, such as the Federal Election Campaign Act, we put in prohibitions against foreign powers and foreign nationals. Unfortunately, the Trump family doesn't seem to understand that.
Congressman, you know this better than I do, but the Constitution of the United States is a little bit nebulous when it comes to this idea of whether or not the President of the United States can be indicted while he's in office. However, there are no protections offered to other members, let's say, of the president's family or immediate orbit. Do you have confidence that there will actually be prosecutorial steps that are taken to people, if not the president himself, then people around his administration?
I do. I have great confidence in Special Counsel Mueller. He was a former FBI director. He was a former U.S. attorney. And if you look at the people he's already hired, he hired the top criminal law expert from the Department of Justice. He hired another expert in foreign corruption as well as bribery. He's going to hire an additional 13 prosecutors. He's not messing around. And you don't do that if you don't think there's evidence of wrongdoing.
Well, what does the scale and scope of those hirings really tell you about the priorities of Robert Mueller right now? When you look at the actual staff of people, the ensemble he seems to be putting around himself for this investigation.
It's definitely criminally focused. He's definitely focused on corruption, on bribery, on financial crimes. And if you just look at the whole range of possible crimes that have been committed, you have obstruction of justice by the president. You have Jared Kushner lying multiple times on the security clearance forms. I filled out these forms before. Right on the certification, it says if you make a false statement or omit a material fact, you can be subject to imprisonment. You've got Donald Trump Jr. that violated the Federal Election Campaign Act. You've got Michael Flynn, who God knows what he's done. It just seems really bad, which is why he tried to get an offer of immunity. And then you have, Paul Manafort, which may have been, getting campaign cash from the Russians.
I'm glad you mentioned the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. You, as of late, have said he should undoubtedly lose his security clearance when it comes to the administration. Some of your Democratic colleagues seem to have been going recently a step further, saying he should not even have a White House position. Some have called on him to resign outright. Congressman, are you prepared to take a little bit of a step further from what you said in the past and say Jared Kushner should not even have an active role inside this administration?
Absolutely. He should be nowhere near the White House. First of all, his security clearance needs to be suspended. If I had any way advocated for a secret Russian back channel using Russian equipment at the Russian embassy, my security clearance would have been suspended. This was when I was in the military on active duty. And in terms of just lying on those forms, if I had done that, my security clearance would have been suspended. In terms of just his job, why is he even there? Like, what qualifications does he bring other than being a family member of the president? And the answer is none. It's not clear what expertise in Middle East peace he has to offer, what expertise in this whole range of different issues they've assigned him. He simply happens to be the son-in-law. I don't think that's an important enough qualification, unless, you're in a authoritarian dictatorship type regime.
Well, I'm sorry, do you have those same concerns about the president's daughter as well, Jared's wife Ivanka, who many may allege, hey, she doesn't have a particular skill set that is palatable towards high-end government work. Do you have those same concerns about her role in the White House?
Absolutely. And when, she sat in for the president at the G20, I was thinking, maybe I should ask Speaker Ryan if my son could sit in at the next House Foreign Affairs Committee meeting. Because my son, participated in Model United Nations for a few years, so I thought that's probably more qualifications than owning a clothing line.
Well, okay, fair enough point there. I'm curious what your relationship is or your approach right now to your Republican colleagues. Do you think that they are doing enough here in the House of Representatives to hold this administration and President Trump effectively accountable right now?
Not at all. There are a few courageous Republican voices, but those are far and few between. In terms of issues, though, there's two things going on. So on some issues like healthcare, yes, there's a lot of disagreement. There's also a lot of bipartisan agreement on a range of issues such as veterans, cybersecurity, that I've been able to work with Republicans on and get various amendments and laws passed. So there are different things going on. It's not always just all about the White House and resisting. We are getting some things done on bipartisan basis.
Well, we do cover tech heavily here on Cheddar, so since you mentioned cybersecurity, let me ask you about that. You look at the growing threat around the world of ransomware, the recent WannaCry attack, the Petya attack, obviously the cybersecurity threats directly on our own election right here in the United States. What can you tell the American people that is being done at the highest levels of our government to ensure that the basic integrity of the American democracy is not being jeopardized, or at least is being very carefully safeguarded for the future when it comes to the growing threat of cybersecurity?
Not enough. I am one of 4 recovering computer science majors in Congress. And recovering.
Fair enough.
I entered politics because computer science was just too hard. But I've been working on this issue ever since I entered Congress. And to me, there's a huge lack of cybersecurity awareness, funding, as well as training. We had massive data breaches at the federal government last year, as well as in the private sector. Everybody needs to upgrade their cybersecurity. And we see with these large ransomware attacks that it's also a global problem. I have introduced the Patch Act along with other senators and members of Congress. It's bipartisan and bicameral. Right now, there is a process known as a vulnerability equities process for the NSA and other intelligence agencies to decide when do they release vulnerabilities they discover to Microsoft or other manufacturers, or when do they hoard them, write malware, and then try to exploit it. And if you look at the last 2 ransomware attacks, it happened because the NSA had their own malware leaked out to the public.
Real quick before I lose you, one of the top stories of the week, obviously, the increasing battle over health care. There's a very clear split in the GOP conference. Do you have confidence that this is going to die and not effectively move forward to repeal or replace the Affordable Care Act?
I've learned not to predict what the Senate GOP does. I just want to say that I'm on Obamacare. It is not perfect. I'm happy to work with the president, with Democrats, with Republicans to make it better. But it is really stupid to repeal Obamacare and put something worse in its place.
So if this fails, you are committed to some sort of bipartisan solution, perhaps moving forward to adjust even the elements of the current format that may not be all too workable.
Absolutely, because right now in both the House and the Senate, Democrats have been intentionally excluded by the Republicans.
Congressman Ted Lieu, thank you very much for taking time. It's really great to have you join us on Closing Bell.
Thank you.
I will toss it back to you on Post 10 on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
All right,